Hi, I'm Stefan from Lifestyle Democracy, the community where we learn to live and build democracies one day at a time. Today, as the first video interview for our blog and also for the channel Lifestyle Democracy, it is a pleasure to have a very special guest to join us for the first video interview or video podcast. Before we get started with the main topic of our discussion, which is the interview with Marko Šarić, who is one of the co-founders of Plausible Analytics, we would just like to give you a brief introduction to Lifestyle Democracy so you have a better understanding of what the channel is about and how it relates to what our guests will be talking about later in the show. So the motto of Lifestyle Democracy is to learn, to live and build democracies one day at a time. So if you've been following the news, you may have come across that democracy is in decline. There was a survey recently published by the Associated Press where they have done a survey of adults in the United States, and they have found that 16% of those surveyed believe that democracy works well or extremely well in the United States. And as we know, the United States is considered the beacon of democracy. So if people in the United States have very few people, around 16% of these surveyed people in February of 2021 of this year have recognized that democracy works well or very well, it speaks to the decline of the faith in democracy in one of the countries that is most lauded for democratic practices. In our view here at Lifestyle Democracy, democracy is in decline not because democracy does not work, but because there is absence of democracy. So I will just repeat it one more time. So people confuse the absence of democracy with lack of democracy. They see the failures of our current most popular model of democracy, which is representative democracy, as a failure of overall democracy. If I take myself as an example, would you consider me that I'm an Olympic swimmer if I only practiced for the Olympic Games once every 4 years? Every 4 years is roughly the time when we go to the polls to vote. So if we just vote once every 4 years, does that make us be part of a democratic society? So what happens these 1,459 days between elections? So this is what we are going to be talking about today, and this is what Lifestyle Democracy channel is about. It's about highlighting the examples from around the world, interviewing people such as our guest today to share with us how we can democratize different spheres of our lives beyond just the political, beyond just participating in democracy during the elections, which happened once every 4 years or much less frequently. So the idea of Lifestyle Democracy is to show us how we can make democracy be part of our everyday life, how we can take small steps to democratize the areas of our life that matter the most or where we spend the most time. For example, workplaces where we spend about half of our waking hours or about half of our lives go to work, to education where we spend about a quarter of our lives. So, and also our families. How do we democratize our families? But what do we mean by democratizing families, workplaces? The core idea comes from the Greek words which form the root of the word democracy, which are demos, people, and kratos, power. It's about empowering people. So in Lifestyle Democracy, we see democracy as empowering individuals and communities without harming others or the living environment. So this is a very important notion that we would like to stick with throughout our interview and throughout the rest of the video podcasts that you will be hopefully following. And the idea is that democracy is not an end goal. This is why we say to learn, to live, and build democracies one day at a time. So it's about exploring, finding different ways how democracies work. Because, for example, now, which is going to be the topic of our today's discussion, digital democracy, and how the work that Marko, our guest, is doing relates to some of the aspects of that. So we need to understand how digital democracy can be democratized, how we can empower people to participate in the digital sphere. And there's no singular model. This is why we say democracies, because we are still learning. We're adjusting to how we are learning how to make democracy work as the technologies evolve and change. So without further ado, I would like to invite our guest today, who is the co-founder of Plausible Analytics. And for those of you who do not know, Plausible Analytics is an open source tool that helps website owners receive information about visitors to their website while respecting the visitor's privacy. So one of the main competitors, probably, or the most well-known website analytics tool, is Google Analytics. And this is a tool that that is available for free for website owners, such as ourselves here at Lifestyle Democracy. It's a free tool that website owners can use, but the challenge is that Google is known to be more invasive or more keen on collecting the data from the visitors. And Plausible Analytics is one tool that offers a privacy-friendly analytics for websites. I will not speak much more about Plausible Analytics. I would like our guests to introduce himself to the audience and kick off this interview. So Marco, if you can please introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about Plausible Analytics.
Sure, Stefan. Thanks for having me on. Good luck on the new podcast. I hope it works for you. My name is Marko Saric. I am a co-founder of Plausible Analytics. I mean, Stefan gave a good introduction already. Web analytics tool that you can install on your site to get some insights into how everything is going and kind of learn how to improve your kind of activities in the future. And done in a different spin, kind of more modern spin, so it fits with our kind of more modern world where we have the different privacy regulations such as GDPR and so on. Plausible Analytics is a new way of doing that, a more privacy first way, and we feel a little bit better way of doing it than what kind of we're used to from before from tools such as Google Analytics.
Okay, very, very good. So why is there a need for another analytics tool? So isn't the analytics space already saturated, given that Google Analytics is a free tool and it's a very powerful tool, as you well know. It provides very in-depth analysis, where website owners can learn about how much time visitors spend on the different pages of the website, how they interact with the website, and which is a very useful set of information that a website owner can learn how the audiences interact, where they come from also, and understand how to better target the different audiences. So how did you join, or how did Plausible Analytics start, and what makes it different?
So basically, we're a two-people company, me and my co-founder. I joined about just over a year ago when my co-founder is a developer, so we started developing Plausible, and at the stage where it was ready to kind of release it and start kind of all the communication about it and so on, I joined to kind of help me with the communication and marketing side of things. We try to strike a balance. So Plausible is useful, like you're saying. You can find useful information about your site, such as what people like about your content, where they find you, and things like that. But we try to angle it towards also being privacy first, which Google doesn't have a really good reputation about. So Google Analytics is free and is the most popular tool, and it is installed on something like 80-90% of all the websites in the world on the web. But it's collecting very much data than normal websites need. So the Google's business model is all about data collection for the surveillance capitalism and kind of collecting as much personal data as possible in order to build personal profiles and share that data with different companies in order to sell advertising and target those people with personalized advertising. And that business model has taken Google Analytics and just analytics in general to an area where we feel now it's no longer just about being useful to website owners. Now it's all about these extra levels of insights, hundreds of different reports and different data points about people that most websites don't need. So we're very simple, very privacy first. So we're very easy to use, very easy to understand, and we're very lightweight as well. So we're loading fast. So basically, all this baggage that Google Analytics has because of the advertising and the kind of surveillance capitalism, we got rid of, which made our tool so much better. And even though it's not a free tool, it's still a very nice and even better alternative for many site owners who don't necessarily care about all this extra insights for advertising purposes. We just want what Analytics was in the first place, like interesting insights, useful insights, actionable insights, so they can learn a little bit about what happens to their site, so they can do better in the future and create even better websites, even better user experience in the future. So that's kind of why there's a need for a new one, and kind of what we're trying to do to kind of get that balance between user-friendly and usable and useful, but also, privacy first and compliant with the different regulations and so on.
Yeah, very good. So I would just like to share a disclaimer. When I was building the website, the Lifestyle Democracy website, the default web analytics tool, and also the one that's most well integrated, that comes with many integrations, is Google Analytics. So I started with Google Analytics first, but then when I started writing and preparing the website, I just saw a clash of values with what I was trying to promote and what Google Analytics stood for. So some people say, because Google Analytics is free, if you're not paying, then you're the product. And then I felt that I needed to find an alternative. I searched online, and then I stumbled upon Plausible Analytics and some other open source tools. And we here at Lifestyle Democracy actually use Plausible Analytics, but we are not an affiliate. Just wanted to share that disclaimer with the audience members. And the reason why Marco is invited here, it's because of the philosophy behind Plausible Analytics. So I wanted you to tell us a little bit more about how the idea was born and what are the values that Plausible Analytics stands for, that sets Plausible Analytics apart from some of the other tools.
Yeah, so both my co-founder and I, we were, if you look back, say 5 years ago, we were both very happy with Google. We were using their products. They create a lot of great products that a lot of people get value from it. We were using some of them. We were recommending to our friends, family, and we were fans, you can say. Great tool made helped us a lot. Is it Google Photos or Gmail, or there's so many tools with YouTube and so on. So over the last maybe 2-3 years, we've kind of, our relationship with Google started changing after maybe becoming less ignorant about these things and kind of more aware of some of the issues with the business model that Google is slowly starting to focus more and more on. So back in the day, they were more about users and creating great tools that improve people's lives. And I feel over the last few years, it's more become shareholders, shareholder value, and kind of squeezing more out to users in order to make more money, so they can kind of get their stock price higher and so on. So we were feeling this, and slowly starting to kind of research, like, are there alternative tools to Google search, Gmail, and so on, and slowly started kind of transitioning our own personal lives from being dominated by using Google tools to like trying to find these different more ethical alternatives. And we both had experience with analytics. I come from the marketing world, and where I was using analytics, and even Google Analytics, and I installed it on I don't even know how many websites over the last 15 years or so. And my co-founder came from the developer side of things, where he was requested to install Google Analytics from marketing teams and so on. So we both had experience with this, and we felt like there was a need for something different, something that looks at it from a more modern perspective in 2021, where it's not all about taking as much profit as possible, and there are all these different regulations in place now that did not exist a few years ago, and all these different kind of scandals we've seen about surveillance capitalism and so on. So that was our approach, kind of try to build something that fits with our new views and the kind of the modern world we're living in. And so we made it also kind of very opposite of how Google approaches things in many ways. So Google Analytics, like Plausible Analytics, is 100% open source tool. So all the code is and everything else we do is very transparent and in the open. So like you can we share everything from the code itself, how it's built, so people can actually review it and kind of inspect it and like, do these guys actually do what they're saying they do in terms of privacy, or are they actually sending some data other places and so on. So that's actually in the public, so you can explore it and check it and verify it. But also things such as you can check on our websites. You can see our own traffic. We open our own, so you can see like how many visitors we get and everything like that. We share things such as the revenue we get, number of customers we have, and just in general we try to kind of go all the way on the other end of the spectrum in terms of being your proprietary huge tool that's all about profit, to on our end being a completely open source tool that's trying to kind of in our little way make the web a little bit better, a little bit more user friendly, people friendly.
Very good. So yeah, when I was researching about analytics tools, I was specifically looking, and you touched upon this a little bit, it's that the tools are open source, because generally open source tools tend to be reviewed by the community, like you were saying, and they have more trust and credibility in the eyes of the users themselves. I'm a non-technical person, so I wouldn't be able to verify on my own whether or to what extent Plausible Analytics offers these privacy options that you're advocating for. So I have to take other people's word for it on the internet. But when I was researching on Plausible Analytics, I saw that you had quite an impressive growth in terms of revenues and in a relatively short time. So what do you think makes Plausible Analytics such a successful tool, analytics tool, or what are the contributing factors that made Plausible Analytics such a success? You come from the marketing side, and your co-founder comes from the developer side. So how did you make this rapid growth, so to speak, happen over a very short time?
Yeah, so I'm not technical either, so I cannot verify the code myself either. My co-founder can, and obviously thousands of other people have gone through our GitHub repository and our code there, so it's all there. But yeah, how did we grow so much? So I joined in March last year, 2020. We were a couple hundred customers, websites that used us, and I think our revenue was about $400 per month. Right now we're at 19,500 or something like that. Revenue MRR is what's called in startup sense.
MRR stands for, just for those who may not be familiar, if you can.
Monthly recurring revenue. So it's basically how much revenue we get per month, because we're a subscription business. So in order to use Plausible, you need to pay, and then you pay monthly subscription depending on how large your site is. So that's how we can predict how much revenue we'll get per month. So that went from about 400 to say 19,500 currently, and same with the number of websites that use us, from something like a couple hundred to now we're I think reaching about 15,000 right now. So wow. 15,000 different websites have Plausible Analytics installed, which also means that we've kind of taken away more than 1 billion views directly from the eyes of Google Analytics. So because most of the websites that come to us have used Google Analytics in the past, and then they decide like, okay, let's remove Google Analytics for whatever reason. Let's install Plausible, which means that in our little way we're taking this 1 billion something, I think 1.4 billion at this point, page views that Google had access to before, they no longer have, at least not through Google Analytics. And why such huge growth? I think in general we we've seen this in a couple of other products as well, such as there are now ethical alternatives to Gmail, the Google Mail client, and some of them have had huge growth over the last few years as well, with stuff like ProtonMail and Hey.com. And so we're kind of, if you think of it, we're part of that same trend, the kind of wave we're riding, all of us, of like people becoming more aware of the issues of Google and surveillance capitalism and privacy, and people understanding now that if something is for free, that doesn't necessarily mean that nobody's paying with anything. You might be paying with something else, such as in Google's case, your data, or in Google Analytics' case, your visitors' data of your website. So we're kind of riding that wave, all of us together, which kind of helps the growth at this stage. And the fact that we're so direct. If you come to our website, plausible.io, I think within a few seconds you will understand what we stand for and what we're against, and how we're different from the norm, which is Google Analytics. And we spell that out very clearly, what differences there are, and I think that kind of message, kind of direct and honest and upfront message, really helps kind of build connections and build relationships and kind of build that trust. In addition, obviously, to our open source aspects, that you can actually also verify that whatever we're saying is actually what we're doing, and it's not just marketing or random words. So yeah, I think it's a bit of that, like our approach, our communication, and kind of positioning on the market, and obviously that the whole kind of privacy thing is really growing with more and more people, being happy to say, oh, I'm gonna put my put some money and kind of pay for tools that I feel are more ethical, better, more privacy friendly, and so on.
Yeah, very good. So do you think that, so you touched upon a little bit more about the values and also open source, plausible analytics being open source, meaning that people from around the world can independently verify the code. So given the spectacular growth that you've had, and also the other some of the other alternatives that exist out there, it seems like there is this dichotomy, or this so to say, opposing views about, software being open source versus proprietary, like Google or some other companies. Do you think that there is a time when big corporations such as Google or Microsoft would ever venture more ambitiously in the path of developing open source software? It seems for you that it's working, that people are paying for something that they can actually redo themselves, right? For example, Plausible Analytics, there is a paid portion of it, but also people can use Plausible Analytics for free, right? So
Yes.
how does what is the added value if I can, let's say, as a non-technical person, just use, and as someone who's starting out, usually budgets are more important. So how does open source software become something that's sustainable financially, given that the code can be taken by somebody and applied and in some other context, and we can maybe change the name of it to something else? Isn't there a risk that this can happen? And how does plausible analytics, at least, how do you deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, open source software is a bit of a funny world to be in, because you're right. By our code being open, we've also made our code ready and available. So if you want, you can take our code, download it, and you can upload it and install it on, say, your own server, and which means that you can manage and run your own, self-hosted version of Plausible Analytics completely without any connection to us. You don't need to pay us anything. You don't really need to be in touch with us at all. We don't know anything about you. We don't have any telemetry or any kind of stats that we collect about it. So you can run it on your own. We made it like that. It's part of the kind of the principles of open source and the kind of what we'd like to stand for. We'd like to have that opportunity there for people that want to have it, people that want to self-host, or people that don't or cannot pay at this moment. So it's there. We'd rather have people use self-hosted then not use Plausible at all and use Kubernetes instead. So it's there, it's available, and the way we kind of think about it is that our hosted platform, so the one that you actually need to pay, is there because we make that whole process easier for you. So then you don't need to worry about having a server or installing it or upgrading it or doing like a backup so you don't lose any data or in case you have such a, you do an interview and you get tons of visitors and then your server crashes, you don't need to worry about these things if you were doing the hosted version, because by paying us our fees that we charge, then we take care of all those things for you. We make sure everything's running at all times. It's fast loading. Its uptime is all there, no matter how much traffic you get. And that's a service that's for many individuals, but also for many companies. Mostly for companies, actually, it's like worth paying for, because that means they don't need to have resources that need to have the server running and so on. So it really works for us. This kind of balance is great. We give kind of both options for everyone, and many people, like I've explained before, our growth has shown that many people are happy to pay for an open source product that can be got for, they can get for free. They're still happy to pay for it because of these other reasons, such as the service and the uptime. And sustainability is a big topic in the world of open source. Mostly because of that people can use it for free, and in some projects, some open source projects, maybe there is not this clear disconnect, like what do I get by paying for it kind of thing. So in our case, it's quite easy, quite simple, and it's running quite smooth. But quite a few open source projects that are used by Google and Microsoft and all these big corporations are also like very donation based. So majority of people that use them and companies that use them don't actually pay for these products. They use them for free. And so kind of the sustainability question is much more tougher, because you might have a tool that's used by millions of people, but the couple of people or the team that's actually building that tool is cannot even have a full-time income from doing it. They might need to have a full-time job on the side or so on. So I feel this kind of needs to get better in the open source world in general, so we can have more people and more projects done in this way, so more people and more companies can get access to it. But the kind of the people that are building those tools and that are communicating about those tools also need a way to kind of make a living from doing that. In Plausible case, I feel like we've really done well in that sense, that we built a very sustainable business even though it's open source. Something I've heard a lot last year is that aspect that many other projects have not been able to do the same. I'm hoping that in the future it will become easier even for other projects as well to kind of keep it all open source, keep it all transparent and there for everyone, but also have enough interests, enough people that are happy to pay for it, so they can actually also quit their jobs and then focus on this full time, and which makes the whole ecosystem much better and stronger, and will end up resulting in better open source tools for everyone.
Okay, yeah. So that's very good. So given your success with Plausible Analytics, and provided it being an open source tool that others can use, what would you recommend to other developers or other enthusiasts or individuals who want to develop some software that is open source, that is ethical, that in some way, in the words here that we like to use, that democratizes the digital sphere? What are the recommendations and maybe some of the lessons that you have learned of your recent success be for these people who want to start some open source software and also make a living out of it? And as just another sub question before you answer this one, are you currently full-time at Plausible, just to get a better understanding, or?
Yes, so both of us are full-time. Both are full-time at Plausible. Few months last year, we were not able to get any salary because we were just starting out. There was not enough revenue, and some other months last year, we were not able to pay full salary. So we were basically able to do this mostly because we had our savings, So for about say 8 to 10 months, we were both living from our savings only. While now, last I think January this year was actually the first month we were able to fully cover the cost of Plausible, the cost of our own personal bills and stuff, and kind of pay our own salaries. So I think we are at the level where we're sustainable right now, mostly because it took quite a long time to get to this stage, and took some savings from both of us to be able to get there. So like how others can do it is that can be a model. If you have enough savings, you can quit your job and go for it. If you believe you have a great idea and something you're passionate about, right now it's a great time to be ethical, privacy first, open source, because the world needs these kind of solutions. Because what the world uses today on the web is pretty much tools made by or funded by surveillance capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
It's made by Google, made by Facebook and others. So the world needs these better, more ethical solutions, and there's a lot of space and a lot of opportunity for growth. So definitely, if you don't have any savings, if you cannot quit your job, you can always start as a side project, start to build it up over the weekend, in the evenings. It's how many open source projects start, and how many of even the very popular open source projects are made by people that are actually not working on them full time, like something they do as a kind of hobby or as a passion project on the side. So I feel if you want it, I think now is a great timing to kind of be involved in this space of open source, ethical, privacy first, transparent. There's a really big need, because if you just look at tools you're using yourself and everyone else is using around you, in most cases they're not using ethical, privacy first source. They're using tools that are free because something else is still paying somehow differently, such as by your data.
Okay, very good. So now I would like to move, you mentioned the word ethical a lot, so I want to now move to the next part, and also you focus a lot on privacy, and your Twitter signature says escaping the AdTech machine and making the web a bit more human friendly. So I would like you to expand on this a little bit and tell us, what do you define as AdTech machine, and why is there a need to escape it?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to what we discussed already. Like the whole web, the normal web is funded by the AdTech, by surveillance capitalism. And in many cases, even though we have GDPR, which requires these companies to kind of get clear consent for people to track them and so on, that does not really happen in the web that I see when I surf the web and check different websites. So if they all if they follow the law and it was easy to click say no or click say yes if I want to, but I'm given a clear choice and very easy to understand choice, then there will be no need to escape the AdTech. But the way the web is right now, with all these tricks and hacks and things that websites are using to get more data from you, is I feel that this is why there is a growth in things such as ad blockers and browsers such as Brave, which is kind of blocking all the bad stuff on the web kind of automatically for you as you surf. And this is basically my point is at the stage where we're at right now with the incentive on all sites and businesses being to collect more data because that makes them more money, it's really difficult to kind of coexist with the idea that the web is human friendly, because they kind of if you want to be human friendly, you will give everyone an easy way out of this tracking, but then that you will suffer in terms of the revenue you'll be getting. So we need to kind of find a better balance, and there is a growth in many tools that are now kind of trying to do that, and Plausible is one of them.
Yeah. And what do you mean by ethical? And so you've mentioned a lot that there is a lot of space and room for solutions that are ethical. What do you define as being an ethical?
I think it's for me it's about transparency and trust. I think a lot of people have lost the trust on the web and with the web companies over the last say 5 years or whatever. So there's a lack of trust basically, and by being ethical, I mean you're open and you're transparent and you basically tell it like it is. And even if your business model is ad, you will just say it like it is. I want to collect this and this data about you for this and this purpose. Please give me the kind of consent to do so, yes or no. So basically, just when I say ethical, that's basically what I mean. Transparent and open, and kind of having the person, the kind of your user, as the kind of the key, the valuable person here, the kind of someone that's important. So rather than let's just get these numbers and numbers for advertising purposes, you're thinking of actually your users and kind of how to create a great experience for them that they can trust, and that's kind of ethical. That's kind of my approach to it. So basically, more openness, more transparency, more respect. Kind of, it feels like a lot of web is missing that. And this is also another aspect why all these tools, such as this email providers and analytics providers and search engines, and a lot of whole market, lots of alternatives is coming up over the last few years, and they all have that in common, is that kind of transparency aspect, and the one that we are upfront with you, we are honest, and we tell you like it is, and we do this to kind of respect you, and not have you just as another number in our kind of huge ad collection.
Yeah, very good. So, realistically speaking, Google isn't going away anywhere. Advertising is not going away anywhere anytime soon. It's not just Google; it's also the other big tech companies in the digital space. They're not going away anytime soon. So, what do you think it would take to make these companies, or what should these companies do to be more ethical or more human friendly? What can they do? Because there are a lot of these companies like yours that can be bootstrapped with savings, with a bit of passion, and you do have spectacular growth that you've experienced in the last couple of months, actually over a year now. But these are going to constitute a very small percentage of the web. Still, Google today largely dominates the web. It's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so forth. So what do you think it would take for these companies, or how can they become more ethical, more human friendly?
I mean, the answer is clear, but I don't think they have any intention or interest to do that. At least that's what their actions over the last few years have shown, that they need to be pushed to be more ethical and transparent. They will just not do that by themselves, even though the path is clear to how to do that. So basically, and who pushes them? How do they get pushed? I think there's several answers to this. One is alternatives such as DuckDuckGo for Google Search, or Hey or Protomail for Google Mail, or Plausible for Google Analytics, that people have an option or a better tool, and that suddenly they notice that 1.4 billion. I'm not sure. I don't think they noticed, but 1.4 billion page views is gone from Google Analytics over the last few months because of this other alternative, Plausible. Or I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people have signed up for different email service rather than Gmail, and kind of moved their communication over. So one is alternatives that will kind of bite and kind of take a little bit from all of them. Well, the second one is obviously people. I mean, people, the users, even though it's kind of it's difficult for you to like reach out to Facebook or Google and tell them your opinion. It's not like you can speak to a person there. It's kind of more like a faceless corporation. But people voicing what they want to see is a different one. A different part of this whole thing is like if you keep saying to Google, this you're doing this is bad. I don't want it. I'm gonna use you less. I'm gonna move over to here. That's a strong message for even for the largest corporations. And the third aspect of this, I would say, is regulation. I feel GDPR has made such huge difference in this space in kind of opening or kind of these large companies realizing that they maybe cannot do as they've always done anymore, just because there's this regulation in place that might find them for continuing those kind of illegal practices. So I think between Google alternatives, between people speaking their mind and kind of taking some action, and between regulations coming in and kind of forcing some of these companies to change, I think between those three, we can, we might never be able to remove Facebook or Google, which is probably not realistic and not anyone's goal really, but we might, make a better and kind of more independent web, where you actually don't have one company that stands for 90% of everything, but you have maybe 15, 20 different companies which all stand for 1%, or you have even more, or even, so basically a bit more web, independent web for everyone. And I think that's more like a goal for that's what I'm trying to kind of go for. It's not like to replace Facebook or Google, that's unrealistic, but to kind of gain from them. So they go from, say, 80% of people using the Google's browser or Google search to maybe at some point they will go to, say, 30 or 40% only use it, because there's so many other competitive alternatives that they prefer. And that's, I think, that's a win in so many ways in the future. And the point about ads that you made, ads are not going away. I have nothing against advertising. The fact is that the advertising, the way it's done right now, is not kind of privacy first advertising, and it's not done with the consent of people. And like if you look at Google a few years ago, first many billions they made was completely done on ads, but on ads called contextual ads. So that's ads that don't need any collection of personal data, don't need any profiling of people. They just need context. So, for example, if I'm on your site reading about digital democracy, there will be ads about relevant topics to that. Or if I'm on, I don't know what other website, I'm reading about sports, there will be ads about sports or buying sports shoes or some clothing and stuff. So, or for example, if I'm searching for something on Google, the ads will be based on what I'm searching on rather than on who I am as a person. Or similarly, you could do like geographical based. So that's also context. Like where am I based in the world? If I'm looking for something on this site and I'm based in a specific country, then the ad will be based on what I would like as a person based in that country, rather than who I am and what my browser behavior has been in the last few months and what websites I visited and things like that. And I feel they moved away from contextual advertising just because they have so much data. But I really feel that that's where we have to go back. And is that because of pressure from regulation or some other pressure? I think that's where we will end up a few years down the line, is that we will go back and say personalized advertising is banned. You cannot go and surveil the whole web and all the people and what they're doing and what sites they're visiting and what kind of tools they're using or everything about them in order to sell ads to them, target ads at them. You will just do it contextually, and contextual advertising works. There's no like third party or neutral tool or neutral research that has shown that personalized ads is stronger than contextual ads. There's no proof of that. I think they're equally good, and contextual ads can replace it easily. And contextual ads don't need any tracking. They're just based on the context of the page you're viewing, the content you're watching, the location you're in. No need for anything special, no fancy algorithms and stuff like that. So I think even though ads are not going away, there are much better and human-friendly ways of doing advertising, which we know and Google knows, and Google has made many billions doing that, and should be happy to go back to that.
Yeah. Last time I checked, that was a few weeks ago. I think Google makes over 90% of its revenues from advertising, if I'm not mistaken. So that's it seems like the whole company's focus is on gathering data for advertising and targeting. But here at Lifestyle Democracy, we like to walk the talk or practice what we preach. It's not easy. It's not easy. But in the context of ads, how do you market Plausible Analytics? What kind of marketing practices or advertising practices do you use?
we're a bit different just because of our stance is against Google. Then it will not be also good for us also to go and advertise on Google to get customers. So, like if you start a company or a website, the same as Google Analytics is the norm. Going to Google and Facebook and paying them to get your customers is the norm too in advertising. So that will be like pretty much, well, don't know the numbers, but majority of websites, businesses would go to Google and say, we'll pay this much money and you will get us this amount of visitors over to our website and we can hopefully convert some of them into customers. That is the norm, but because of our stance and of our philosophy, we have said we will not do that at all. So we say no to advertising, paid advertising on Google and Facebook. We have not done any of it. We've given Google and Facebook $0. So we don't do any of that. And customers to that, we don't do any of these popular growth hacks and dark patterns and other tricks in order to kind of get people to pay us and start using us. We like our message of analytics is open and transparent and ethical, the same as our marketing. So this is what you see is what you get, kind of. There are no tricks there, and so basically we have a long list of like techniques and strategies we avoid on purpose. We intentionally avoid them. And some of these strategies, such as paid ads on Google, are some of the main ways the average company grows. So yeah, I mean, we're kind of not really traditional in that aspect. So the way we do grow is being helpful to people. We write a lot of content. We tell it like it is. We try to kind of spread the word and the message about some of the bad aspects of Google and surveillance. We also create a lot of content in general that helps site owners about different aspects of what they're doing and analytics. And just in general, the fact that we are so fresh kind of and kind of a different take on what's the norm also helps us that people that get to know about us, they get so kind of excited and they really love the idea and the kind of how different Plausible is the experience compared to Google Analytics. So we get a lot of people kind of spread the word about it through word of mouth. So that's where we can grow organically without needing to collect any personal data, without needing to pay Google to grow. We basically we're grateful to people that use Plausible and people that use Plausible and then tell their colleagues or their friends and other site owners about their experience, and kind of with that we're kind of spreading the message one side at a time. And every day there's few new websites that delete Google Analytics and install Plausible, and we feel that that's the way to go. We could try and force all of this by investing a lot of money into Google Ads, but I think it would be inauthentic and kind of fake from our perspective. That would be like we say one thing and do another. The other hand, and I think that's something we don't want to be part of. So we're happier with this kind of slower, organic approach of one side at a time. We don't need to grow by millions of websites every day, and we don't need to overtake Google at any point. We're happy to kind of grow naturally and with this stability in mind.
Very, very good. Yeah, thank you for that, Marco. So now I would like to move a little bit towards some of the topics that you've touched upon and the overall theme, which is digital democracy. So what do you understand by digital democracy?
Yeah, I mean, the digital democracy is a new term for me. I was not aware of it, at least not until you reached out. I was thinking at first it's something about voting online, kind of doing the votes and elections online through digital means. But the way I understand it, it's very similar to what we discussed and how Plausible is built. It's something that empowers people and respects people and gives them opportunities to do things the way that treats them well and with respect. So yeah, I mean, the fact that we're transparent, open source, kind of fair and upfront and direct, no tricks involved. And I think all of this, if every company, every website, every business was like that, it would be a more democratized web for all of as well. So that's kind of my understanding right now.
Very good, very good. So why do you think privacy matters for democracy? I know one of the cornerstones of plausible analytics is privacy, and based on what I was reading on the website, which by the way, regarding just going back a little bit to the advertising that you were discussing, I found the blog very useful, and the information that you have posted. I also read about the strategies that you avoid to use. Some of them go against the advice that I've been given about how to grow the blog, which is very interesting now. But this is something that we can discuss at some other point, perhaps. But just given that privacy is very important for plausible, why do you think it matters or do you think it matters for democracy?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think obviously privacy and what you believe in, who you are as a person, should be your choice. You know, you want to share that, you don't want to share that. That should be up to you. And I feel some of that is lost by all this data collection, and the fact that if you visit one website, then you will be followed with some advertising about that specific topic for weeks, and it kind of feels like you've given something of yourself away without giving your consent to it, and it feels a bit, like you were abused, kind of in a way, like your privacy was abused. So, yeah, I feel it's a cornerstone. It's very important for democracy, digital or not. It's there to make people feel like they have some control and something to say in their lives. So yeah, I feel privacy for sure is really important. I don't know how we can do without it.
And so yeah, do you think plausible analytics contributes to democratizing the digital space, and to what extent?
I mean, in our little way, like our in-house websites and who else is using plausible by self-hosting. It makes the web more open to everyone. It's now you have an alternative that's not made by Google, and you can use it, and you don't even have to pay for it if you don't want. You can use it in any way you want, in your own way. So yeah, in our little way, yes, kind of. And this is what I meant with the whole movement of privacy first and so on. I think then if you put plausible in the whole movement with hundreds of other projects that do something similar for different aspects, email and so on, then definitely that can be felt the larger level, the more global level of the web, and how it's becoming more democratized and more open for everyone.
Yeah. How do you plausible ensure the privacy? Because for me, it was very important when I was building the website. I started out with Google Analytics first, tested it out, but then read that I have to have GDPR cookie. Then I didn't want to have one, but I still wanted to have at least some notion of how many people are actually visiting the website, actual people, because I can get some of this data through the hosting provider, but the information is incorrect because there are a lot of these bots and the numbers are just inflated. So how do you count visitors, and how it differs from Google, which typically is able to gather more information, I guess, or has more information about the users and more context around it.
Yeah.
So how do you differ, and how do you actually count, while at the same time stating that there is no need for any sort of consent cookie to visit a website which is run on plausible analytics for analytics purposes?
Basically, again, we're completely built from the ground up. So basically, we started with nothing, which means that we could think about how the web is today and how the privacy regulations are today. So we could build from that point of view. And we basically started everything with minimal data collection. So Google Analytics allows you to see, I think, a couple of hundred different reports, and all combined, there's several hundred different data points. They collect about each individual person who visits the site. Well, we have everything we do have is on one page, so one report rather than hundreds. So that means that we need much less data, we collect much less data, we display much less data than Google. which means in general, automatically you're much more privacy friendly. What else we do is we've taken a very strong point on many of these aspects. So, for example, Google Analytics can track if you have they create this user ID on everyone, and if you have say 5 different devices, Google Analytics would know that it's the same person between your computer, your phone, and your second computer, and your smart TV or whatever. They would know that it's the same person using all these devices. They will be able to have a profile. Well, we've made it clear that you cannot track cross devices. So if you have 5 different devices and visit a Plausible website, we will see you as 5 different people. Well, Google would know you're the same person. So that's a very clear distinction that's privacy first. And same distinction is being made with the sites. So on Google Analytics, you can track cross sites. So Google Analytics would know that you're visiting site A, site B, site C, and they will build a profile on all the sites you're visiting. While sites that use Plausible, there's no way to say, oh, you visit site A, site B. If you site A, site B, your personal time, there's no profile that tracks you cross sites, which is again a huge boost of privacy. And the third one, another important one, is that we have no persistent identifiers. So Google uses cookies. They, I think, 4, 5, 6 cookies, both first-party and third-party cookies. They place when you visit the site using Google Analytics, which then track you over many days that you come back and months, or that they track you across different websites that you visit and devices. So we use no cookies at all. We have none of these kind of persistent identifiers, which means also that say you come back to the same website 5 times in 1 month, for us that will be 5 different people again, rather than one same person that has returned 5 times over the month period. So we really made so many steps to make Plausible privacy first, while not kind of making it kind of inaccurate or not usable enough. So, for example, like you mentioned with all the bots and so on, we don't have any bots. It's privacy first, and it doesn't give you as much data as Google Analytics does, not that level of detail and so on, but it still gives you more than enough that 15,000 websites are now using it without problems, including some very, very large corporations as well and companies. So you can get, same as we mentioned, like personal data kind of advertising versus contextual advertising. You can get a lot of useful information even for site owners in their analytics without tracking people across their devices, across the different sites they visit, across the different days, and so on. So that's kind of the balance we're taking, and the core idea of Plausible is that. So we will never move over to something else. This will always stay like this, like privacy first.
So do you collect any IP addresses or any information about the users? How do you know that the user is a user? Coming from a mobile device, or how do you know? Because on Plausible you can see where the user also connects from, whether it's a particular country in the world.
Yes. So basically, you have every visit, every browser request. It's the way the web works. Every browser request sends 2 pieces of information. One is the user agent, which sends your browser version, your operating system version, and then it also sends the IP address. So basically, these 2 pieces of data that every website gets every time you visit them, there's no way to remove that. We use that in order to display the stats. But then we take several steps in order to not store any of that data, not log it in the future. So basically, that IP address and that other user agent we use to get the stats. But then there's not us keeping it. We cannot track anyone using those details kind of more long term. So we use basically the way the browser and the internet works in order to get the data, but we don't kind of go any extra steps to do so, such as placing cookies or taking even more information that we don't need, such as what Google Analytics does.
And since you're open source and the code is on GitHub and it can be downloaded, a competent person can verify the code and ensure that what you're seeing is really what you do.
Yeah, that's quite easy, and we actually get quite often we get people checking it just because they're curious, So a lot of developers use Plausible, so they can actually read the code, they understand it, and they're curious like how it's done. And so we get a lot of people just looking at that code, and it's been reviewed by many, and it does what it's there in the script. You can see how what I explained right now. We have actually explanation in normal words, so anyone can understand them on our website. So I can understand them, but we have the code as well that developers can actually. Oh, I don't want to read the article about this that explains it to normal people. I'm going to read the code, and they can't say the same thing. So yeah, that's possible.
Very good. So I have 3 final questions. So one of them is, do you rely on other open source tools for your daily work?
Yeah, I love open source. Even though I'm not a developer, I love open source, and I speak. I use Linux, so I'm calling. I'm speaking to you from a Linux computer, which is fully open source, and fully, like my main browser is Firefox, which is a fully open source browser, and open source Plausible is open source, and a lot of Plausible is built on a lot of other open source kind of databases and kind of tech tools. So yeah. I'm all into open source, and I think we need more open source projects. We need more people using open source. I think that's a great way forward.
So yeah, you mentioned just another sub question to this one. So you mentioned that you use Linux and open source, and sometimes the perception of people is that open source software, since they're usually passion projects that people develop after their full-time job over the weekends and the evenings. So generally they don't have this team of developers that are providing support. So what do you see as some of the challenges of why people are not, or the reasons why people are not using as much open source? I've tried Linux distribution, Ubuntu. I don't know if that's the particular one you're using. For me, sometimes it was more difficult to use because you need to code, and if you wanted to install something, in Windows, it's much easier. I don't know about Macs. People say it's even much easier to use and maintain. So what are some of the challenges or the reasons why you think less people or more people are not using open source software, since it's free, the code can be verified, and so forth? Why do you think more people are not using open source tools?
Yeah, I mean, some open source tools are widely used. I mean, maybe not, like Linux runs every server in the world pretty much, so that's very open source. Like you have something like WordPress is open source, and I think like 40% of the web is run on it. Like people create websites, they use WordPress, and that's a fully open source tool. So there are some open source tools that are more used than others. In general, yeah, I mean, proprietary products are stronger, they use more, and obviously they have more resources. People promoting them. The problem for Linux specifically would be like that it's difficult to buy a computer with Linux pre-installed. You go to a store, you buy a computer with Mac or Windows. It's difficult to buy one with Linux, so that's kind of like a really big issue for them. But basically, another challenge in the past, at least, was that the image was always like it's a tool for developers. The open source tools are made for developers by developers. They're not like user friendly, or the design is not user friendly or intuitive or nice. But I feel the open source world, and Plausible is a great example. Many people that come from proprietary tools come to Plausible and say, "This is beautifully designed. It's faster. It's so much nicer than the proprietary Google Analytics." And I feel the open source world has understood that over the last couple of years and has moved to create a more very intuitive and nicely designed tools that are easy to use even for non-developers, non-tech people like me. I mean, I say I'm using Linux. Right now I'm on something called Fedora, and I use it, but I don't need to code. I don't even know to code, so I won't be able to code even if I needed to. But everything's there, and user interfaces are there. It looks beautiful. It runs fast. It's an amazing product. I have used Windows for maybe 20 years, but I'm coming from Mac. I used Mac for about 15 years before moving maybe 3 years ago to Linux. And I feel I'm not missing out on anything, and I'm gaining a lot, which some of the same aspects that we discussed, such as transparency and open source and ethical aspects that Linux is great at. So I feel
Yes, I've used last year, towards the end of the last year, I have dual boot set up between Windows and Ubuntu, and so I know that if I log on to Ubuntu, then I'm pretty much safe if I want to browse the internet, and I don't need to worry about the spyware that sometimes Windows have. But it's interesting that you mentioned that the open source world is recognizing the need to make more user-friendly and more better user experience, and maybe, you know, if there was this global fund where people can pitch in money and then it can be distributed to open source developers, maybe we would have more open source solutions, so developers who are creating these tools would have a steady income, kind of like these innovation funds that they have for startups, but maybe we need one for the open source world. But that's something that we'll explore at some other point.
For example, I believe the governmental institutions should be using open source tools only. So I'm sure they have thousands of computers, for example, for their employees and so on. And they're now, most of them at least are using Windows, and they're paying fees for that and all that stuff. And I feel if you know, people in power would say, okay, let's put that money and put it into open source projects, that would be an amazing thing for open source world. That would again put more money and more resources into open source, which will mean better products for us all, and also a better experience for people that work for these governments and so on. For sure.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because then the people can also verify the code and ensure that the code does what the code is intended to do. Then people would have more trust in because the world is moving towards this e-government options, e-government, more digital solutions, and then if it's all open source, then people will trust these institutions, because the developers would say, yes, the government is not collecting this data, or this data is safeguarded properly. So definitely I can see that would help bolster trust and democracy in the digital sphere, which is going to be a dominant or a very influential and very important part of
would be amazing.
Yeah.
Would be amazing. And the fact also, like all the open source tools are so much lightweight, so much more lightweight than the proprietary tools. It's like Plausible is like 45 times lighter than Google Analytics. It uses less electricity, it runs faster, and so on. But Linux compared to Windows or Mac, like when I used my first time I switched to Linux 3 years ago or so, like I installed Linux on an old computer, and it runs fast.
Yeah.
Like a computer that's very, very slow with Mac, Linux can run very fast because they built in a better way. There's none of this privacy baggage where they have to collect all the data in the background and use waste a lot of resources. So in many ways, open source world can help. And if governments, of people individually, we can switch and talk about it. But something like governments saying like, from next year, all of our official technology will be open source. Spend this money on these specific tools to improve them and make them competitive, and so they can do what we do right now with proprietary tools. It would be so amazing.
Yeah, now I would like to move on to our second to last question. So we've touched upon topics of Google, big corporations, data. You also mentioned profiling of data. And I guess part of this profiling of data and users will become even more sophisticated as we move, as the technologies of artificial intelligence become more sophisticated. So what are your thoughts on the future of democracy in the world of rising and more sophisticated artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I guess we have the choice, decide how the future will be. So either we can kind of continue in the current path where we're like, all these big corporations are taking advantage of everyone, and they will now just use these AI tools to do it even better and even more. Or we can say right now, through regulations, through people making differences, through better tools being available, we can say right now that that's not the future we want, and we want to use these future technologies for better purposes for everyone. So I feel it's kind of it remains to be seen what the future is. I'm hopeful. I'm working in this space because I'm hopeful that it can make a difference. But obviously, who knows? We will see it. It will take a few more years before anyone knows anything. But definitely, like, you as an individual have big power to tell to do what you do, take the steps for yourself personally, obviously, but then tell people that trust you, like your family, your friends, your network, your colleagues. You have quite a big role to play in this. Like, if we can get a lot of people that believe in this to actually take steps and actions towards a better future, I think then I'm quite sure that the better future will be there, and that the governments will understand it and start pushing for it, so the regulations and so on. And then it becomes difficult for those that want to abuse these new tools to actually do what they want, because people will be more aware of it, people will be more vocal against it, people will have alternatives to go away from them.
So yeah, in one way, if I may summarize some of the points that you have said, it's if we want to see a more humane, ethical, or like we say here, democratized digital space, then perhaps we need to consider making the software that we use on a daily basis open source, so the developers can verify and ensure that what is said is what is being done. And also, if we're talking about artificial intelligence, which is going to become more and more important in the years to come, then maybe we need to consider making it open source, and also put a challenge to these big corporations of today and the future corporations that will rise tomorrow, the unknown corporations, to pursue the path of open source development. Perhaps that's one way to go. Marco, the final question is, do you have any final comments that you would like to share?
No, I mean, I think my last answer is kind of my nice message that I'd like to send is that, yeah, we can, maybe the proprietary tools or surveillance capitalism is the norm and is the dominant force of the web, but if you feel like something is not as it should be, you can take steps in your personal life. You can start talking about it, start informing other people, and that will kind of make a difference in the long run for us all. And I feel that that's worth doing, worth fighting for. And that's what we're doing in Plausible, at least.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Marco, for your time and for telling us about your insights and thoughts on the world of open source, telling us more about how Plausible Analytics works and how it puts privacy first, while at the same time helping make the web a little more human-friendly. So it was a pleasure to have you as the first guest on Lifestyle Democracy channel.
Thanks, Stefan, and good luck on all future 100 episodes.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully, yes. So just for the viewers, we would like to remind them that if you would like to continue seeing more interviews like this, please leave a comment below. Maybe you liked something that Marco shared, or maybe you have ideas about the next guest who should we interview. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and also make sure to subscribe so you will be getting the latest updates and the latest video interviews with exciting guests like Marco. So all of the information that will be important, like links to the website and the sign up page so you can follow also our newsletter, will be in the comment box below. So make sure to check it out. Thank you very much for your time, and until next time.